This is a review of the topic, how changing a value affects the mean and the median. The number of students in the 10 schools in a district are given below. So we have the numbers 173, 177, all the way up to 397. And I noticed that they're already in order for us. It says, suppose that the number 173 from the list changes to 203. Answer the following. What happens to the median and what happens to the mean? In other words, we're going to calculate the median and the mean before, so let me just write down before we change the number 173 to 203. And we're going to calculate again after we change 173 to 203. And just to organize it, that's why I'm putting before and after. And I'm also going to write down what the median and the mean is before, what the median and the mean is after, and then that way it's easier for me to compare the two. Because what they're asking for, if you look at letter A, what happens to the median, they're going to ask you if it increased, decreased, or if it stayed the same. So that's easy to tell if you have them both written down. I'm going to provide a link in the description below that you can use to access the calculator that I use for this topic. This is the website you're going to be using to help you calculate the mean and the median, because it is a little tedious to go into a typical calculator and type in all the numbers and find the mean and the median. But if you don't know how to find those two things, make sure you go back and review how is the median calculated, and the same thing for the mean. Again, the purpose of this topic is not really to to calculate, but it's more to compare what happens when you change a number. So I'm just gonna fix the windows so they're side by side, so I can type in the numbers a little bit easier. Okay, now that I have my windows side by side, it makes it a little bit easier for me to type in my numbers. And just a little tip: when you type in your numbers, double check them, because if you put one number incorrectly or you forget to put one of them, it will come out wrong. So notice that there's 10 schools that are listed below, so that's how many students are in 10 different schools, which means I should have 10 different numbers. So I'm gonna type in the numbers and I hit enter every time so I can go down to the next line. So I have all my numbers, and I can see here I have 2, 4, 6, 8. I have 10 different numbers. And again, I'm just going to double check that they are the same as the other page. So the first two look good. The second two looks good. The next two looks good. Then I have the next two again. It looks good. And then the last two looks good as well. And then what you're going to do now is just scroll down a little bit more. You're going to hit calculate. And you can see here in blue, it tells you the mean, the median, and the mode. But we only need the mean and the median for this topic. So now in my notes, I'm going to type in the mean is 263. The median is 257. Now looking at the instructions underneath the set of data here, it says suppose that the number 173 from this list changes to 203. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go back to these numbers we typed in. I'm going to replace the number 173 with the number 203. Then I'm going to hit calculate again. Scroll back down, and then I'm going to get some new set of data. So I can see here that my mean is now 266 and the median is 257. Now looking at the questions, letter A says what happens to the median? So if I look at the median, before it was 257, after it's 257. It did not decrease, it did not increase, it stayed the same. So my choice would be this one here, the third choice. And then letter B, what happens to the mean? So if I look at the mean, before it was 263, and then after it was 266. So if I look at the answer choice, so it didn't go down, it didn't stay the same, it did increase. And then they also want you to type in this case, it says it increases by, and you got to fill in the blank, so by how much? So I can see that it increased in this case by 3. So I will type in the answer 3 for this question. What they want you to observe is that in this case, the median wasn't affected by changing one of the numbers in the data, but the mean was affected. So that's one thing to keep in mind. When you calculate median and a mean, your mean is affected more often than the median. It is possible that sometimes the median could be affected, but the mean is affected, especially by something called an outlier. So if you see any numbers, like for instance, going back to these numbers up at the top, if I were to add another number in there, and let's put let's say 600, that would definitely change the mean by a lot. So that's called an outlier. It's a typical number that doesn't fit the typical pattern. Think about when you're taking tests in school. If you're always getting B's on the test and one day you get an F, that F is going to bring down your average a lot. That's called an outlier because it's not something you usually get. And you'll notice that if you're always getting B's and you're trying to increase your score, your overall grade to an A, is very difficult because, when you get an A, it's not that much different than your typical score of a B. But when you get a score that's way off, something that's not usual, that's when you start to see your average get affected. But the median, is unaffected by what we call outliers, and that's why sometimes it's better to use the median instead of the mean. But this is pretty much an idea of what you got to do for this topic, and that's it.